What is up YouTube? Welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be doing a Dead Age 2 weapons guide. Now in this guide I'm going to be breaking down the 3 firearms, so pistol, shotgun and rifle, and also doing the bladed weapon and the blunted weapon. Now I'm going to break down the stats and the perks for each type. Obviously this is only my opinion, but the stats do kind of back up as well. So hopefully it gives you a better insight on what's going on. Firstly, we're going to start off with the pistol. Now the pistol, pretty good in my opinion. You've got 3 types of pistols. You've got the Glock, you've got the Beretta, and you've got the revolver. Low base damage of 37. And you've got a high base damage of 47. Now obviously depending on what pistol you have and what level it is, will obviously be there or in between. Now in terms of the ammunition, it's the easiest to make and the most cost effective. 4 shell casings and 6 material. I mean, that's pretty simple to get. That's like one run. That's like a night run really, and you can have pretty much full stack of ammo going on there. Now in terms of the perks themselves, normal range attack with 100% damage, very nice. 100% is decent, so one shot, 100% damage depending on your perception and what kind of armor the other opposition has, but that's a pretty good start. Now your second perk, or your first usable perk, is going to be Liquid Courage. Raises chance of pistols to hit by 20% for 2 rounds and raises critical hit chance by 10%. To waste a go or waste AP on this perk, in my opinion, is just not worth it. I would rather just use an attack basically. Second usable perk, you got Debilitating Shot. It's pretty good, but in my opinion it's only worth it because of the stun chance. Now you got a 75% stun chance, which is basically 3 out of 4 chances to stun. Does 120% damage and causes injured leg. Now pretty decent, but mainly because of the stun. If the stun wasn't there, I would probably say avoid it. Next usable perk is Headshot. Ranged attack with 150% damage, causes startled, 75% chance to cause blind. In my opinion, more of a finisher type move. So if you've got a zombie that's under 100 health, this is potentially a perk that you would use to finish him off. And just in case of the fact that you don't finish him off, that's for some reason, say he's got a little bit of health left, you've got a 75% chance of causing blindness. So if the enemy manages to get a shot off or a hit off, he's blind, so, or there's a chance of him being blind, so he might graze you. So pretty decent, but again, in my opinion, not worth it. Now onto the final 2, and in my opinion the best perks of the pistol. You have Give Cover, which by far is probably the best perk that you can get for the pistol. Now obviously this only counts for melee attacks, so this is going to be better against zombie based opponents, because obviously most bandits normally have weapons. Not always, but they normally do. Now zombies, apart from the spitters at the back, but most cases you're coming up against melee attacks with zombies. Now obviously once your round is finished and you've got this active, whenever a melee attack hits any of your team, you will shoot or you will attack them in return. So think about it, you're facing 6 foes, you're facing 6 melee attackers, and they all attack you in one round. That is 6 lots of damage that you are going to be attacking them with as well. So when it gets to your turn, you've got another 2 turns. That's 8 attacks in one round. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. The fact that you're getting more attacks when your turn is over, that's huge. That's game winning basically. So in my opinion, the best perk to use for the pistol. Finally, you've got the Adrenaline Rush. Fires 3 shots of 110% damage at a target. Raises strength of the attacker by 33% in the next round. Now that final bit is kind of pointless for a ranged attacker because strength only affects melee damage. So this is kind of good as a more expensive finisher to headshot, but the fact that it raises strength is kind of irrelevant because you're being used as a ranged attacker. Now you could potentially use this and let's say whittled him down to under 50 health. You could then maybe use a melee attack next round just so you're not wasting ammo, but in my opinion it's not worth the AP. I would just use Give Cover because that would probably kill him before he's even attacked you or after he's attacked you, or just use a normal one-shot hit, just use a basic attack. Again, not amazing, but will finish off something pretty quickly. Moving on to the next firearm, we have the shotgun. Now this is my favorite weapon in the game. Now you have 3 types of shotguns. You've got the survival shotgun, you've got the sawed-off shotgun, and you've got the military shotgun. You've got a low base damage of 42 and a high base damage of 52, so quite a lot higher. Obviously, again, depending on what weapon you have and what level it is will depend on the damage that it's doing, and also comes into your perception rating and all that. In terms of the ammo and how much it costs, it's not too bad, to be fair. 6 shell casings and 8 material, so only a little bit more than the pistol. Pretty decent. Now obviously all this is based on basic ammo, so not the anti-personnel and not the armor piercing rounds, but the basic ammo will do the job. Onto the perks. Normal ranged attack with 100% damage, which is perfect. Onto the first usable perk, we have penetrating slug, and right out of the gate, the first usable perk, in my opinion, one of the best defensive perks to be able to use. Now that sounds a bit weird saying defensive as it's an attack, but basically let's say one of the back row melee attackers has pushed forward because they need to go to the front row to hit you. You could then just use this, push them back again, and then they have to use another turn to come forward. Now some zombies are able to come forward and hit, but there are quite a few that have to move forward before they can do anything. So again, you're basically getting a whole free turn, 2 lots of damage before the attackers even got to you. Plus the fact that it does 2 for 1 damage. Obviously you shoot the first guy, he moves back and hits the other guy. Anytime there's an attack for a 2 for 1, in my opinion, is very, very good. On to the next perk, Scatter Shot. 3 for 1 damage on this one. Does 100% damage to an entire row. Has a 50% chance to cause wound. Now in my opinion, this is huge. A 3 for 1 damage output, that's massive. Obviously you had penetrating slug, which obviously did 2 for 1. 3 for 1, you have a chance to basically clear out a whole row with 1 shot. Now obviously they will need to be a little bit low on health, but the chance of taking out a whole row, which I have done by the way, when you've got the crawling zombies where they've got no legs, I have managed to take 3 of those out with 1 shot. That's huge. You're basically halving the number of attackers. Let's say they're a full attack, halving the number of attackers with 1 shot. Plus has the chance to cause wound as well, which is only going to cause more damage to them in the long run. It's just a huge perk. So far we've had 2 perks that are both very viable in any sort of offense. On to the next perk, we have Burst. This is an amazing finisher. 170% damage, causes crippled, 75% chance to cause dent armor. So this perk is not only good against non-armored types, but also armored types. It is going to cause damage to both. The fact that it does 170% damage as well, it's very similar to the headshot on the pistol. It's a pretty good finisher. 170% damage is huge, and it only costs 2 AP, so you have a chance of, obviously, let's say the round before you use 1 AP and you want to focus up, you've got a chance of using burst and then also another attack afterwards. So in one attack or 1 turn, you could potentially just kill a pretty high health enemy without too much effort, to be fair. So very good perk again. So 3 perks that are all very viable. On to the last 2 again, we have Frantic Fire. In my opinion, this is a more expensive version of Scatter Shot. Now it basically does the same thing as Scatter Shot. The added chance of causing an unconscious, that's pretty huge. Raises strength for attacker by 33%. Again, it's pointless because we're a ranged attack. Obviously, if you're on the front row, you could make a case that it's pretty decent, but for the AP used, the strength of the attacker is irrelevant in my opinion. But it's pretty much a more expensive version of Scatter Shot. I would just stick with the Scatter Shot unless there is a reason why you need to cause unconscious. Now it is a toss of the coin, 50% chance, so I would just stick with Scatter Shot, to be fair. I don't think it's worth the waste of AP. And on to the final one, we have Devastating Shot. Very powerful, does 300% damage. Now obviously if you've caused stun or vulnerable of one of the zombies or one of the attackers, you're talking 400% damage. I mean, that's huge. Very high cost AP though. A great finisher for bosses or high health enemies. So obviously once you've got the enemies that are kind of like the bosses or have been about and they've got the red skulls on them that are kind of like flashing, kind of like battle hardened enemies. Great sort of finisher move, but again, it's quite a high AP cost. Maybe not worth it in my opinion. Maybe if you've just got 1 zombie left and you want to mess around, then maybe you can see how much damage damage it does. I imagine it would do huge damage depending on your perception and stuff. But again, for the cost of it, the cost just outweighs the benefit on that one, in my opinion. Finally, onto the rifle, the last of the firearms. Now, you've got three types of rifles. You've got the AK-47, you've got the M16, and you've got the M4 carbine. You've got a low base damage of 49, and you've got a high base damage of 59. Obviously, again, depending on what weapon you have and what level it is. In terms of the ammunition cost, this is where obviously the rifle tends to fail miserably. The damage isn't great, but the ammunition cost is just too much. 8 casings and 8 material. It's quite a lot. Now, obviously, you could do one run and get pretty decent ammo return from that, but the fact that it uses so much ammunition and it costs so much to buy and make, it just doesn't make it viable, and it's just not worth it, in my opinion. We are going to go through the perks though. So straight off the bat, just from basic attack, a ranged salvo with 3 times 60% damage. Only 60%. So the other two have 100% damage. Now obviously you are firing 3 shots, so it does technically do more damage, but the fact that it uses 3 ammo, just in every way, this gun, in my opinion, is just, the cost outweighs the benefit massively. It's just not worth it. So I would never suggest going for a rifle on your main character. In most cases, on your 3 characters in your team, when you go out venturing, I would say have maybe one of your guys. In this case, I've got Tessa with a rifle, and then the other 2 pistol or shotgun. Now you could go 2 pistols, 1 shotgun, 2 shotguns, 1 pistol. You could go all 3 shotguns. I mean, that's the dream, right? But the rifle, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. It needs tweaking, it needs fixing, it needs to make it more viable. Going on to the first usable perk, we have ground salvo. Does 3 times 55% damage, causes injured leg. Does 3 times 70% damage to targets affected by unconscious. Also usable in the front row, which is kind of nice, but again, for the cost of the ammo to the amount of damage you're doing, it's just not worth it. I mean, you're talking 3 shots to, in total, 165% damage, whereas 2 pistol shots does 200% damage. Obviously, give or take perception, and also whether you've actually hit the target properly. In every case, the cost just outweighs the benefit. There's only 1 or maybe 2 perks where I can see using a rifle would be very, very handy. But in terms of the start, especially when you're starting out, it's just not worth it. Maybe in the later rounds, yes, but right now it's just not worth it. Moving on, we have burning salvo. Does 5 times 50% damage to random enemies in 1 row. Has a 50% chance to cause wounded. Now this does 5 times 50% damage to random enemies in 1 row. The way that this would work pretty well is if you had enemies that were quite low. Let's say you've managed to burst a few enemies down. Let's say you got 3 in a row and they've all been bursted down below 100. You have a high chance of either killing 2, definitely killing 1 unless you get really unlucky, but you've got a chance of killing 2, so it can become viable in that case, but you need specific things to happen to be able to use these perks, which in my opinion don't make them viable. On to the next one, we have merciless salvo. Does 5 times 50% damage to 1 enemy on this one. So the previous one was random enemies in 1 row. Now it's just 1 enemy. Now again, this is basically just a more cost version of either the burst for the shotgun or the headshot for the pistol. It's just a more costly version of that. You're using 5 times ammo to do basically the same thing. Now it does 250% damage, obviously in total. It's just not worth it. Again, the cost of the ammo usage, it will do pretty good damage, and as a finisher, absolutely. If you've got an enemy that's, I would say, within 120 of dying, you've got a very strong chance of killing it, providing that you hit the shots. On to the final 2, we have, in my opinion, the best perk to have for the rifle. Now again, this is very similar to the pistol. It's return fire, whereas in pistol was cover. Now return fire basically does exactly the same as what cover does for the pistol. The only difference is it works for ranged attacks. So again, this one is going to be better for fighting against bandits rather than zombies. Again, you have got the spitters, so there is a case for it, but in my opinion, it's going to be a lot more useful against bandits, especially in the arena. If you're using this in the arena, there's a high chance that this is pretty decent. Pretty much, again, you have 1 turn, you've used your turn, and you use this. Whenever a ranged attacker attacks your team, you will return fire with 3 times 60 damage. So basically just a return fire of your normal base attack, which again is huge. The only problem that you've got with this is that it will use up a hell of a lot of ammo if there is 6 ranged attackers. Now, it's unlikely there's going to be 6 ranged attackers, but let's say there's 4 ranged attackers or 3 at best. So you're going to be doing 9 shots in return, so that's 9 ammo, plus then you're also going to be using your turn. That's another 6 ammo. I mean, at best case scenario, that's 15 ammo that you've just used up. That's a huge amount. It's so cost heavy when using a rifle. It just does not make sense. In the later rounds, maybe when you're not worried about, you know, your finance, everything else is maxed out and you just want to try out the rifle, absolutely 100% go for it. It definitely does damage. Just the cost outweighs the benefits massively, in my opinion. Final one, you have Hail of Bullets. Now, this is pretty decent. It's just very, very costly. 6 times 95 damage to up to 6 random targets. So obviously that's in any row, and raises power of the attacker by 50%. So this is pretty decent if you've got, let's say for example, Tessa's got rifle, we use this, and then you want to use Molotov in the next one. Use a Molotov in the next round, you're doing 50% more damage on that Molotov throw, which is huge. I mean, that's pretty good, but the AP cost is so much. 6 times 95% damage is pretty good as well. Let's be fair, if you've got 3 or 4 enemies that are pretty low on health, you have a chance of wiping out the entire squad on the enemy team. But once again, it's very situational, so you need these things to be happening to make this a viable cause. It is very good, don't get me wrong. The fact that it's random targets is beneficial, but in my opinion, if it was 6 times 95's damage to 1 target, I think that would be huge. Now, obviously, if there's 1 person left, then absolutely go for it. But by that point, you should be winning anyway. But 6 times 95% damage is nice. But just, again, the same for every single rifle problem. The cost outweighs the benefits too much. Finally, we move on to the blunted and the bladed weapons. Now, I'm going to try and mix these two together because they go kind of hand in hand. In my opinion, the blunted weapons are the best, but obviously there is a case for bladed weapons. I just think the blunted weapons, just the positives just far outweigh the negatives. So to start off with the blunted weapons, you've got a crowbar, you've got a baseball bat, and you've got a nightstick. You've got a low base damage of 40 and you've got a high base damage of 50. Going on to the bladed, you've got kitchen knife, you've got a saber, and you've got a katana. Again, low base damage of 47, high base damage of 57. So although the bladed does do more damage, technically, if you actually look at the bladed, which is the main issue, the bladed damage, 2 times 70% physical damage. So it only does 70%, not 100%. Now, obviously, the weapon stats do play into effect, and obviously there is certain stats that will make a difference, but again, that's for another video. Although the bladed weapons do more damage, the blunt weapons have more benefit to them, mainly because of the armor side of things. We read this: strong against armored targets, less damage than ranged attacks, but strong against armored targets. That's the huge thing. We'll get into that in a minute. The other thing as well you've got with bladed weapons is it does 2 times hits on 1 attack. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, that's pretty good, it's doing 2 lots of damage. True, but it's also got 2 times the chance of grazing, whereas, you know, you only get 1 times chance on the blunted weapons, whereas on this one you've got 2 chances of basically messing up. So already it's doing less physical damage than 1 hit of the blunt weapons because of the 70%, but you've also got double the chance of missing or grazing, basically. So you could be doing even less damage. It just does not make it worth it, in my opinion. So comparing the two, obviously we've gone through base damage. So the first one, both the same, defensive stance, pretty decent. If you've got a tanky guy at the front, like my guy is, my main guy, I have him at the front, he's pretty tanky. And sometimes I will use it if needed against like the bosses and stuff, but in most cases I haven't needed it just yet. This is where the blunted weapons tend to shine a little bit more now. So you've got brute strike and you have blade thrust. Blade thrust deals 120% damage with 90% accuracy. Successful hits causes vulnerable, and it might propel the target backwards, and it might damage the enemy behind them for 50%. Pretty good. But then the brute strike deals 130% damage, so 10% more damage with the same amount of accuracy. Successful hits causes crippled. The force again could shove the enemy back into the one behind it and cause 50% knockback damage. So again, you're talking the blunted weapon does more damage, has a chance of crippling, and also still knocks him back. So in every way, the blunted attack, the brute strike, wins in this one. Moving on to the next one, you have nerve strike and eye poke. And this, in my opinion, is where the blunted weapons just far outweigh the bladed on this one alone. Nerve Strike, 130% damage with 90% accuracy, causes stunned. That's the huge part at the end. Eye Poke for the bladed, 2 times 70% damage and causes wounded and blinded. So the wounded and blinded is great, but it still gives them chance to hit back. Now, obviously, the higher blinded they are, obviously the more likely they're going to graze you, but still they still have a chance of hitting you again. Whereas Nerve Strike does 130% damage with 1 hit, 90% accuracy, so the chances are you're probably going to hit unless you just got Iron Jesus not on your side. But the huge thing is the fact that it causes stun. It's not a chance to cause stunned, it causes stunned, which I've been saying this in all my videos. If you want to go back to the beginner's guide, I'll leave the link up there in the top right. If you go back to the beginner's guide, the main thing I said is that if at any point you can stop your attacker from attacking in their round, any chance that you get to cause stun on an enemy and it stops them from having an attack and you end up having more attacks, you win the game. It's that simple. If you can have more attacks than the other team, the other enemies, you will win the game every single time. So the fact that it causes stunned is huge, and it's not a chance of causing stunned, it causes stunned, which is huge. On to the final two, we have Wary Stance and we have Blade Storm. Now Blade Storm attacks the entire front row, doing 140% damage, 50% to cause vulnerable. So toss of the coin whether it's going to cause vulnerable, which is okay. If it's obviously a critical hit, then it'll be 100%. This is basically scatter shot from the shotgun, but with the blades. Now in my opinion, this is a pretty good one. This is a very easy way of destroying a whole front line. Again, I can see you easily taking on those crawling zombies without the legs again, and you could easily wipe them all out, to be fair. And the fact that it causes 50% to vulnerable as well, even if you don't kill them, there is a high chance that you could potentially cause vulnerability to them as well. Wary Stance counters melee attacks for the next 2 rounds with 80% physical damage per counter. Again, you know me, I absolutely love the counters. Any time that you can get in more attacks when it's not your attack, I think is huge. On the base of things, I would probably say Blade Storm's pretty good, and in my opinion probably just about wins. But the fact that it only just about wins and the rest of them are landslides in the blunted categories, you still got a case of going bladed. But again, blunted wins just every day. The fact that you can counter, obviously this is only for melee attacks, but it's pretty good, to be fair. Final one, you have Jump Attack for the blunted and you have Sensitive Strike for the bladed. 2 times 210% damage, deals 2 times 230% damage versus stunned or vulnerable. So if they're vulnerable, they'll do 230% damage, which is pretty good. I mean, it's a decent finisher, very good finisher, to be fair. Again, you have got 2 opportunities of maybe grazing on that one, so it's decent. I don't like the fact that it has to have 2 swipes to cause the damage though. And then the Jump Attack for the blunted and melee attack with increased range, causing 230% damage, 330% versus unconscious targets. Now, as far as I'm aware, this will work against the back row as well. So 230% damage is pretty huge. It's just a really expensive finisher, basically. The AP cost is quite a lot. 230% damage is decent. The fact that it does both front row and second row is pretty good. But again, for the cost, it's not really worth it in my opinion. But again, if you wanted to use it just for the sake of using it because you've maxed out everything else, then go for it. It's definitely going to do some damage. And like I said, the fact that it does both rows is pretty huge. But that's everything, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If it did help in any way, please smash that like button. It does help me loads and it lets me know that you want to see more content on Dead Age 2. Also, if you have any suggestions and guides that you would like me to do, then please leave it in the comments below. And obviously, if you want to see any more content, hit that subscribe button. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day and I'll catch you in the next one.